everybody. Welcome to the 5th session of Signum Academy's Narnia camp. We're looking at The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe this time, and we are getting to the point in the story where a lot of things are happening. We've had a good introduction of the characters. Now all 4 children are in Narnia, and the story really gets going. So I'm going to start sharing my slides, and we will get started. Here we go. Believe that should be working. All right. So this week today, we're talking about the right and wrong, hope and fear aspects of these 2 chapters. We have been talking about decision making and good and bad in Narnia and dealing with something new like Narnia and how our own characters influence how we deal with those things. So we're going to see that even more today on a much bigger scale, because it's in these chapters that the Narnia story goes from something about just the 4 children to something about a whole world. So it's an exciting part of the story. So we'll go to our next slide, well, to our first slide, really. If you remember, we left off with the 4 children, Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy, in Mr. and Mrs. Beaver's dam. They are talking about what has been going on to the 4 children in Narnia, who Mr. Tumnus is, who the White Witch is. We've begun to explain a little bit about what Narnia is like. So they have just sat down finally to finish their dinner and are getting ready to talk. So they're in a problem. Mr. Tumnus is kidnapped by the White Witch, and we're about to hear the whole story behind that as much as we can right now, and then what they're going to do. So, stratagem and stories at the Beaver's Dam. All right, it begins. But what'll they do to him, Mr. Beaver? Gasped Lucy. So this is Lucy asking about Mr. Tumnus, who has been kidnapped. Well, said Mr. Beaver, you can't exactly say for sure, but there's not many taken in there that ever comes out again. Statues, all full of statues, they say it is, in the courtyard and up the stairs and in the hall. People she's turned, he paused and shuddered, turned into stone. But, Mr. Beaver, said Lucy, can't we, we must do something to save him. It's too dreadful, and it's all on my account. Okay, so we're just restating the problem. Mr. Tumnus is kidnapped, and it's on Lucy's account. It's because he took care of her that he's in trouble with the White Witch. And now we're learning just how terrible this White Witch really is. She turns people and animals into stone. She doesn't care about them. She just turns them into statues for her own use. So that's a huge problem. Here we go. I don't doubt you'd save him if you could, dearie, said Mrs. Beaver, but you've no chance of getting into that house against her will and ever coming out alive. Couldn't we have some stratagem, said Peter? Couldn't we dress up as something, or pretend to be, peddlers or anything, or watch till she was gone out, or, hang it all, there must be some way. This fawn saved my sister at his own risk, Mr. Beaver. We can't just leave him to have that done to him. So the children's characters are coming out. Lucy is standing by what needs to be done, what is good to be done, that they need to save Mr. Tumnus because of everything he has done for her. So her character, again, is influencing her decision-making in this situation. She's willing to put herself at risk in order to do the right thing. And Peter is now joining her and doing the same thing. And of course, they're both bringing their own personalities to this good approach to what's going on. Peter is coming in with, can we have a stratagem? Can we really understand the situation enough that we can work out something to go in and rescue Mr. Tumnus? He's being very practical. He wants to be hands-on. He wants to go in and somehow save Mr. Tumnus. So they're both, and they're all working towards a very good thing. Let's save Mr. Tumnus. But we also now have these beavers who are very hospitable, as we saw in the last session. They're very welcoming and calming. They're cozy, uh, but they also have a lot of information that from the other world. So they're kind of these in-between people, these intermediaries between the children and the rest of the world of Narnia. The children are coming in with a very good heart, trying to solve this problem, but they're coming in with not very much knowledge. So the beavers are a good meeting place for them, a good way for the children to become familiar with Narnia and understand everything they need to in order to really deal with the situation the way it ought to be dealt with. So Mrs. Beaver is explaining, you have a great heart, children, but this is the reality of the White Witch. This is the way she is. Mr. and Mrs. Beaver are coming in with some very important Narnian information. And that keeps going because they introduce us to arguably the most important character in the story and in the Chronicles of Narnia, Aslan. So, Aslan. The children have been hearing stories about Narnia, and they're trying to figure out ways to strategize what to do in Narnia. But they're coming up short. They can't do this on their own. And at that point is when Aslan walks into the story. And he is where the strategizing and the story meet. So, here we have Mr. Beaver. It's no good, son of Adam. No good you're trying, of all people. But now that Aslan is on the move, "Oh, yes, tell us about Aslan," said several voices at once, for once again that strange feeling, like the first signs of spring, like good news, had come over them. "Who is Aslan?" asked Susan. "Aslan?" said Mr. Beaver. "Why, don't you know? He's the king. He is the lord of the whole wood. But not often here, you understand. Never in my time or my father's time. But the word has reached us that he has come back. He is in Narnia at this moment. He'll settle the White Queen all right. It is he, not you, that will save Mr. Tumnus." All right, so we'll pause quickly there. The children have come to the end of their ropes. They can't do what needs to be done in order to rescue Mr. Tumnus. But Mr. Beaver comes in with the idea of Aslan, that he is the resolution to this problem. He comes in, C.S. Lewis describes it, the children are feeling like it's the first signs of spring, and of course that's important because the big thing about Narnia right now is that it's trapped in winter, right? And it feels like good news to these children. So what do you think of when you think of spring or good news after a hard day? Or, yes, coming across something wonderful after something very difficult. That's what's happening right now. And we often say that we feel refreshed when something like that happens, like it's new life. Basically, this is hope that is happening. Aslan is bringing hope to a hopeless situation. Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy, well, especially Peter, Susan, and Lucy, we'll get to Edmund in a moment, they are feeling hopeless. And Aslan is their hope, according to what the beavers are saying. And what is happening inside of the children is agreeing with what the beavers are saying about Aslan. But we don't really know a lot about Aslan, right? In fact, currently we basically know nothing. So Susan asks a very sensible question. "Who is Aslan?" asked Susan. "Aslan," said Mr. Beaver. "Why, don't you know? He's the king." So Aslan is the king of Narnia. He is hope to a situation, but he also is the right thing for the situation. Because remember, we already have a monarch in Narnia. We have the White Witch. She's calling herself queen, right? But we have learned that that's not right. The White Witch is not truly queen of Narnia in the way that she ought to be. So Aslan is coming in to correct that. He's the real king of Narnia, the lord of the whole wood. This is how Mr. Beaver is describing him. So again, our difference between right and good and true and wrong and bad and deceitful is coming up. We've got the White Witch and we have Aslan. But the children the children don't understand how this story is going to end, of course. They don't know what the powers on each side are. Okay. Hello. We've got, correct me if I pronounce your name wrong. Is this Beck? He's asking, what does intermediary mean? That's a really good question. So if you have one person and another person, and they need to talk to each other and understand each other, but they might not be so good at doing that for whatever reason, there can be someone who comes in the middle to help them talk. An intermediary, if you break the word down, there's inter, so that just means between, and then immediate, or mediate is also between, so it's like going between two things. So someone who's in the middle of two different things. So the beavers are kind of in the middle of the children and their world on one side and Narnia on the other side. It's a go-between. And in specifically a go-between who helps come to a solution about something. So the beavers are being these are playing this role for the children and Narnia. And we're going to see this idea of an intermediary a lot of times from this point in the book onwards. And so it's great that you asked what that means, because it will become a very central part of the story. Okay, so we have another set of things. It's not just the children in Narnia. We also have Aslan and the White Witch, right? The children are talking to the beavers, trying to get the information about both sides that they need. So Susan has asked, who is Aslan, in a very open way. Edmund is asked, she won't turn him into stone too, said Edmund. So Edmund, remember, has a special relationship with the White Witch. He's eaten her food, and he's kind of in her service at this point. He's supposed to bring his siblings to her, and if he does so, he'll become her prince and get Turkish delight, which is what he wants. So he's hoping that her powers might be pretty strong and maybe take care of this Aslan figure whom he doesn't really like. So he asked, she won't turn him into stone too. Lord love you, son of Adam, what a simple thing to say, answered Mr. Beaver with a great laugh. Turn him into stone? If she can stand on her 2 feet and look him in the face, it'll be the most she can do and more than I expect of her. No, no, he'll put all to rights, as it says in an old rhyme in these parts. Wrong will be right when Aslan comes in sight. At the sound of his roar, sorrows will be no more. When he bares his teeth, winter meets its death, and when he shakes his mane, we shall have spring again. All right, so we come to the turning point in the story. It's this prophecy. It's talking about who Aslan is. And he is the person who sets everything to right. He is the hope and he is the good in a situation that is wrong and hopeless. And the beavers model to the children this trust in Aslan. Edmund's like, well, what about the White Witch's power? And Mr. Beaver's response is so confident that he's even able to laugh when the White Witch's powers are brought up. I mean, we've just been talking for this whole time about how strong the White Witch is, how she's put Mr. Tumnus in prison, can turn things into stone, and how it's impossible for the children to rescue Mr. Tumnus out of her hands. And yet, when all of that strong, horrible power is put up against Aslan, Mr. Beaver's trust in who Aslan is so high that he's able to laugh. Yeah, all of those horrible things that we've been talking about, they're nothing compared to Aslan, to his power, who he is. And that's a really important attitude towards Aslan. It's apart from the children's kind of mysterious individual responses to hearing the name of Aslan. Remember that Susan heard nice music and Lucy felt like it was the holidays, and Peter felt strong and brave, and Edmund felt horrified. So that was a brief response to Aslan. But the Mr. Beaver's response to Aslan is the first response we see in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe from a person who has a long history of knowing who Aslan is. And the main thing that jumps out at you of Mr. Beaver's relationship to Aslan is his trust. Now, what is Mr. Beaver trusting Aslan to do and to be? Well, that's this prophecy. And if you feel like it, it would be a great idea to take this prophecy and write it out so that you remember it for the rest of the story. You can make a pretty picture of it, write it in neat handwriting. I don't know if any of you like that, or print it out. You can do some cool graphic design things with it. But it's a really important prophecy for the story, and it's also a hopeful thing to remember for our everyday lives too. So let's go back and reread that prophecy because it's going to be really important for the rest of the time. Wrong will be right when Aslan comes in sight. Okay, so when we see Aslan, all the wrong things will be set to right somehow. It's important to notice that this prophecy shows that there are things that are wrong. So we're not going to pretend anymore that the White Witch is fine and that turning people into stone is the way that things should be. No, there is a set idea of what is right, and what is going on right now with the White Witch is not right. And Aslan's great power and the hope that he brings is because he's coming in to bring what is right back. He is restoring things to the way they should be. Okay, at the sound of his roar, sorrows will be no more. So this sort of pain and suffering that Narnia has been experiencing under the White Witch is going to find solution in Aslan. When he bares his teeth, winter meets its death, and when he shakes his mane, we will have spring again. So when a lion bares his teeth, that's a little frightening, right? Like, because it shows the lion's power. And when he shakes his mane being that thing that is his pride, right? It shows how strong the lion is. When he is showing how powerful he is, Aslan is doing so in order to bring spring back, which has been the desire of the Narnians for time out of mind now, right? We've seen Mr. Tumnus long for spring. We've seen the beavers long for spring. We've seen all of Narnia ache for spring. And Aslan is going to put all of his power into bringing the right back, into bringing spring back and new life back to Narnia. And that's the prophecy. And that's what Mr. Beaver is trusting Aslan to do. And as we've seen, he's doing it really confidently. He's trusting all the way in Aslan. But let's talk about this Aslan king. Someone has asked Mr. Beaver if Aslan is a man, right? Because we all are kind of familiar with Aslan as a lion because we've seen so many pictures, or maybe we've watched the movies or read the book before. But Peter, Susan, Edmund, and Lucy had no idea that Aslan was a lion. Of course they'd assume it was a man. Aslan a man? Said Mr. Beaver sternly. Certainly not. I tell you, he is the king of the wood, and the son of the great emperor beyond the sea. Don't you know who is the king of beasts? Aslan is a lion, the great lion. Oh, said Susan, I'd thought he was a man. Is he quite safe? I shall feel rather nervous about meeting a lion. That you will, dearie, and no mistake, said Mrs. Beaver. If there's anyone who can appear before Aslan without their knees knocking, they're either braver than most or else just silly. Then he isn't safe?" said Lucy. "Safe?" said Mr. Beaver. "Don't you hear what Mrs. Beaver tells you? Who said anything about safe? Of course he isn't safe. But he's good. He's the king, I tell you." "I'm longing to see him," said Peter, "even if I do feel frightened when it comes to the point." So we've just learned that Aslan is a lion, and that lets him, as a lion, he's king over all of Narnia, the humans, the beasts, whomever, and he is the king of beasts. So he's at the top of it all, and he comes from the Emperor beyond the sea. So he's so above Narnia that he doesn't even live in Narnia, but he is Narnian. So he comes and visits Narnia, and he knows about Narnia. But what we want to concentrate on right now is this question about who he is as far as if he's safe and if he's good. As we've seen just before, Aslan is the king. He's this powerful person who's going to restore what is right in Narnia. That's what the prophecy says. But what good is a prophecy if the person can't carry it out, right? So here we're learning that Aslan is as powerful as he says he is, as powerful as the prophecy is making it out to be. That you're silly if you're not frightened of going to Aslan. That's how powerful he is. That we can't consider him safe, as in totally easy. He is powerful. He could crush people, and that's part of the hope, right? That he's able to take away the sorrow and the winter of Narnia. You have to be powerful to do that. There's no point in hoping in someone who isn't strong. So we have Aslan, very, very strong, right? That's the picture that the beavers are painting to the children. And yet, they also are just as vocal about saying that he's good, right? He isn't safe, but he is good. And that makes all the difference. Is the White Witch safe? No, she's been turning people into stone. But the reason why her power is a problem is because she is bad. What makes the situation bad or not is not the power. The power is necessary in order to have something done. What makes a difference is the goodness. So the White Witch is not good. She is not doing good things, and she's not acting from a good character. Aslan, on the other hand, is strong, he is powerful, and he is good. And that's why the beavers are able to trust him. Yes, Bella, you're so right. He is not a tame lion. He is able to be and do whatever he wants, except that whoever he wants to be and whatever he wants to do is good. And that makes all the difference. That's why it's that combination of power and goodness that is makes him be able to complete the prophecy, right? That's why the beavers are trusting him. He's able to restore right because he's powerful enough to do so and good enough to do so. And so now we see Peter have a really interesting response. Yes, that he's good but not tame, right? Good doesn't mean weak. It means doing the right thing with what your power is. Peter's response is very interesting. He wants to see Aslan. He's just been told that he would be silly if he weren't frightened at seeing Aslan. But nonetheless, he wants to see Aslan. He wants to see this good power. And we see Aslan having this effect over and over again. And I think that we can identify with that effect a little bit too, because in our own lives, like say there's this beautiful mountain that you want to see. You want to see something that is that powerful and that beautiful, or the ocean. Everybody wants to see the ocean in all of its power because it's a beautiful thing. Or a person in high position who is kind and good and doing the right thing. You could be put in prison technically by that person, like that person might have the power to throw you into prison, but if that person is good, you fear that person in a different way. You respect that person, but you want to get to know him or her. So it's a similar thing to what's happening with Aslan. He is frightening, but he's also good. So it draws you in a trusting and refuge sort of way, rather than in a, oh, I have to run away and be scared of him because he might hurt me. Right. So Peter is longing to see Aslan, even if he feels frightened at the moment. That seeing Aslan, seeing this person who's powerful enough to restore goodness to Narnia and the right to Narnia, that is worth any sort of fear that he might feel at the moment of first seeing Aslan. All right, so we come to this question: what does it mean for the children that Aslan is good? We've heard that he's the king. We've heard that he's a lion. We've heard that he isn't safe. Like Beck is saying, like Bella has mentioned, he's not tame, but he's good. And that's really important for us to think about, both for the story and for our own lives. If you have power, if you have talent, if you have gifts, that's great. But are you using them well? Are you good? That is a very important thing, to be able to help other people with who you are. You want to not just have all of the skills, but you want to have the goodness as well. Aslan is it's the biggest example of that, because he has the most power. So he's able to do the most of anything, but he's good. And so that means that this whole world of Narnia that he is the king of has hope for what is right to come, what is spring to come. So the reason why, or at least one of the reasons why I think it's really important that Aslan is good and why it helps the children, is because his goodness combined with his power is what brings them hope. Without Aslan's character, they have no hope. They have no hope to rescue Mr. Tumnus. And the Narnians have no hope of ever seeing spring again. The only hope that the beavers have had, that Mr. Tumnus has had, that the birds in the forest, like the robin, have had, is that Aslan could bring spring. And we're seeing that, in fact, he is powerful enough to bring spring. But the prophesying does not stop there. We have a second prophecy, right? So we have just been brought into the story that it is way bigger than the children thought, right? They thought it was just about them exploring Narnia and then them rescuing Mr. Tumnus. They've just been told, actually, you can't rescue Mr. Tumnus, but there is someone who can, and he's coming, Aslan. And in fact, Aslan is going to restore everything. So now this story is not just about the 4 children and Mr. Tumnus and the beavers, but about all of Narnia and Aslan and what he's going to do. So we had a story that was about this big, and in this chapter, poof, it got this big. So let's see how this second prophecy plays into that story. The quickest way you can help him is by going to meet Aslan, said Mr. Beaver. Once he's with us, then we can begin doing things. Not that we don't need you too, for that's another of the old rhymes. When Adam's flesh and Adam's bone sits at Cair Paravel enthroned, the evil time will be over and done. So things must be drawing near their end now. He's come and you've come. We've heard of Aslan coming into these parts before, long ago. Nobody can say when, but there's never been any of your race here before. All right, I'd love to hear what you think about these 2 prophecies, especially the second prophecy in light of the first prophecy. Aslan is coming to bring all of this to right, but we also have this second prophecy of a way that Aslan is going to be bringing everything to right. When Adam's flesh and Adam's bone sits at Cair Paravel enthroned, the evil time will be over and done. So Aslan is bringing a lot of redemption to Narnia. He's bringing right to Narnia after a lot of wrong. But the children, or at least Adam's flesh and Adam's bone, play a role in this coming to right again. It's not just Aslan doing anything off in the distance. He's using people here. He's having the story happen of bringing everything to right again. And the children find themselves smack dab in the middle of this huge story of redeeming Narnia. They find that since they're Adam's flesh and Adam's bone, remember, they're daughters of Eve and sons of Adam. It's kind of weird how Narnians have been addressing them as hey, daughter of Eve, I mean Lucy, or hey, son of Adam, I mean Edmund. That's because they're the answer to the prophecy. All of these Narnians have kept these prophecies kind of hidden, but always in their mind, that they're looking for these humans. They're looking for sons of Adam and daughters of Eve in order to complete this prophecy, because these children are part of the hope that Aslan is bringing. Now, I wonder how you would feel if you were put into this sort of a story. If you were suddenly thrown into a new world and told that you were part of the hope of the redemption that everybody's waiting for, of everything being made right again. So that's where these children find themselves. But we have, remember, the enemy, who is the White Witch. She is the antagonist, as we describe it in literary terms. She is not wanting these prophecies to be fulfilled. And her character is very opposite to the characters we're seeing with Aslan and the children. Because, rightly enough, isn't the White Witch human, right? Why does it matter that the children are here to reign at the castle in Cair Paravel if the White Witch is already human? Isn't the prophecy already fulfilled? But it's not. She'd like us to believe it, said Mr. Beaver, and it's on that she bases her claim to be queen. But she's no daughter of Eve. She comes of your father Adam's. Here, Mr. Beaver bowed. Your father Adam's first wife, her they called Lilith, and she was one of the Jinn. That's what she comes from on one side. And on the other, she comes of the giants. No, there isn't a drop of real human blood in the witch. That's why she's bad all through, Mr. Beaver, said Mrs. Beaver. True enough, Mrs. Beaver, replied he. There may be two views about humans, meaning no offense to the present company, but there's no two views about things that look like humans and aren't. Okay, what do you think is happening in this passage? Do you think that Mr. and Mrs. Beaver are saying that only humans are right or only humans are good? It might sound a little like that, because why does it matter that the White Witch is pretending to be human or isn't actually human? Well, it matters for at least two reasons. One, the prophecy says that they're humans who need to be ruling at Cair Paravel, that it's always been that way. If you have read other parts of the Chronicles of Narnia, other books, you'll know why it's important that a human always rules, but we will save that for another camp. What's going on here, though, is not that humans and only humans are good. It's that the White Witch is pretending to be something she is not. That last line from Mr. Beaver, there's no two views about things that look like humans and aren't. So, the White Witch is lying. She is taking a position that is not hers by lying. Now, does that remind you of anybody that we've seen already? Edmund has lied to his siblings before, right? To get a position that isn't his. He's trying to pretend to be oldest and better than everybody else, and he's been willing to lie in order to get it, in order to get that position, right? That is exactly what the witch is doing. So the witch is being deceitful and dishonest and cruel, and Edmund has been showing those same character traits too. So that's one side. we can contrast that with Aslan and his crowd, who have been true to who they are. Like Lucy has been true to who she is and what she believes, and they have been good about that. They have been doing the right thing and making right decisions based on that. And so they're honest, right? So we have truth and honesty on one side, and dishonesty and cruelty on the other. And that is why the White Witch, being what she is bad. Because she's taking something that's not hers through deceit. So keep that in mind, because that's the same thing Edmund is doing. All right. So we come to this other prophecy. Why is the White Witch doing what she's doing? Why is she being cruel? Why is she keeping Narnia under winter? Well, because of another prophecy, said Mr. Beaver. Why is she trying to get the children and get Edmund and kill everybody? Because of this other prophecy. Down at Cair Paravel, now, all of us, we don't know what Cair Paravel is technically, right? That's the castle on the seacoast down at the mouth of this river, which ought to be the capital of the whole country if all was as it should be. Down at Cair Paravel, there are 4 thrones, and it's a saying in Narnia, time out of mind, that when 2 sons of Adam and 2 daughters of Eve sit on those 4 thrones, then it will be the end, not only of the White Witch's reign, but of her life. And that is why we had to be so cautious as we came along. For if she knew about you 4, your lives wouldn't be worth a shake of my whiskers. Oh boy. So there's this prophecy. Not only that Aslan is going to come back and restore things, and not just that humans need to be on the throne at Cair Paravel, but that it's 4 humans, 2 boys, 2 girls sitting on the thrones in Cair Paravel that is going to end the witch's reign and the witch's life. Now the story all makes sense. Once we understand the prophecy, the whole story makes sense. The White Witch hates Aslan and hates the children because she is holding on to something that is not hers through deceit, and that's evil. It's making her be cruel. She's doing the wrong thing out of the wrong character. And so that's how the story is turning. Aslan is coming, promising the right, and the White Witch is fighting for the wrong. And here we are, with 4 children running for their lives in a beaver's dam, and one of them is under the White Witch's control. So, Edmund, as we know, has eaten Turkish delight and has been listening to the witch, and had already been showing some of the witch's character traits even before he got into Narnia. Before he even left London, he had been bullying people in school, using his strength for cruel reasons rather than for kindness, like Peter does, or Lucy does, or Aslan does. So they realize that Edmund is missing. Oh boy. Then they figure out, okay, we need to go find him, right? The reason there's no use looking, said Mr. Beaver, is that we know already where he's gone. So Mr. Beaver says, I already know where Edmund's going. There's no point in looking for him. Everyone stared in amazement. Don't you understand, said Mr. Beaver. He's gone to her, to the White Witch. He has betrayed us all. Oh, surely. Oh, really, said Susan. He can't have done that. Can't he? Said Mr. Beaver, looking very hard at the 3 children, and everything they wanted to say died on their lips, for each felt suddenly quite certain that this was exactly what Edmund had done. All right, so the 4 children out looking for Edmund, but Mr. Beaver knows that there's no reason to look for him, because Edmund has already betrayed them. In his heart, he had already betrayed them when he agreed to do what the White Witch wanted him to do and bring his siblings to the castle back in an earlier chapter. And he had already betrayed them in our world when he was willing to bully Lucy and lie to his siblings. So it's been this steady character of doing the wrong thing from a wrong character this whole time. Now, we keep going. Then mark my words, said Mr. Beaver. He has already met the White Witch and joined her side, and been told where she lives. I didn't like to mention it before, he being your brother-in-law, but the moment I set eyes on that brother of yours, I said to myself, treacherous. He had the look of one who has been with the witch and eaten her food. You can always tell them if you've lived long in Narnia. Something about their eyes. All the same, said Peter in a rather choking sort of voice, we still have to go and look for him. He is our brother after all, even if he is rather a little beast, and he's only a kid. All right, so we see that Edmund has betrayed the children and the beavers. But we've also seen conflict between Peter and Edmund before, and I just want to quickly highlight this before we move on because it's going to become important later. That Peter, even though he hasn't done the right thing with Edmund and not forgiving Edmund, not resolving that problem he had with Edmund for lying, he's still caring of Edmund. And when it comes down to it, no matter what Edmund has done, Peter is still treating him like a brother. He's our brother after all. He's only a kid. Even if he's not a good person or hasn't been doing the right thing right now, he's still our brother and we need to go look for him. So Peter's love for Edmund is getting over even the conflict that they've had and the bad things that Edmund has done. So Peter is wanting to see past that and go look for Edmund and do what it takes to bring him back. So keep that in mind for another time. But here we go. They're in a huge problem. They don't know what to do. They can't get Mr. Tumnus, and they can't get Edmund, and they're stuck. Oh, can no one help us? Wailed Lucy. Only Aslan, said Mr. Beaver. We must go on and meet him. That's our only chance now. So this whole time we've learned about who Aslan is, how powerful he is, how good he is, how much hope that brings. And now it suddenly becomes extremely personal to these three children, Peter, Susan, and Lucy. Their brother, Edmund, has betrayed them, and he's lost, and they want to bring him back. So you couldn't get any closer to the hearts of these three children. This is the worst sort of problem they could find themselves in. And to that personal level, Aslan becomes the only hope. And they have to move towards Aslan in order to have the right things done. So we're seeing the prophecy already play out, right? What's the prophecy? That Aslan is going to bring things to right again. Now the children are beginning to see that Aslan is their only hope. So we're going to leave them there with the children needing to learn to trust Aslan because of his power and because of his goodness, because of his character, as we've seen, because of his truth. But they're still trapped. Okay? They are stuck. The chapter ends with them realizing that the queen is going to chase them in her sleigh, that she might move to the stone table, and the beavers and the children are in danger. She's going to use her sleigh without bells, and that just goes along with the deceitfulness, right? That she's not, the White Witch is being a liar, so she's going to move about Narnia secretly. She can't do it openly because she's not leading honestly. So even though they're hoping in Aslan, they're still in danger. And that's where the chapter ends, that they need to run away from the White Witch. So we'll leave them there and focus on Edmund for the last bit of our time. Basically, why is Edmund being this way and how does that play out? I'd love to hear what you think about Edmund's character right now. Why did he leave the children? Why did he leave something as happy and hopeful as Aslan and something as cozy as the Beaver's Dam and all of that delicious food? Why? We've probably all been in a situation where we've asked ourselves, why am I being this cranky when so many good things are happening? So I wonder what you think about that. Why is Edmund being the way he is? So the next chapter begins. And now, of course, you want to know what had happened to Edmund. He had eaten his share of the dinner, but he hadn't really enjoyed it because he was thinking all the time about Turkish delight. And there's nothing that spoils the taste of good ordinary food half so much as the memory of bad magic food. And he had heard the conversation and hadn't enjoyed it much either, because he kept on thinking that the others were taking no notice of him and trying to give him the cold shoulder. They weren't, but he imagined it. And then he had listened until Mr. Beaver told them about Aslan, and until he had heard the whole arrangement for meeting Aslan at the stone table. It was then that he began very quietly to edge himself under the curtain which hung over the door. For the mention of Aslan gave him a mysterious and horrible feeling, just as it gave the others a mysterious and lovely feeling. Okay, so part of what is going on with Edmund is what? Is he enjoying his time with the beavers? No. No, all he can think about is Turkish delight. He has been tricked by bad magic food that's stopping him from being able to enjoy the real good food in front of him. And things that are supposed to bring hope, like Aslan's name, is giving him a horrible feeling that he can't understand. And he does not like talking about it. Yes. Yes. Bella's making a good point that he wanted more Turkish delight, and it is very rude to refuse a queen even if she really isn't. Right, so good thought, Bella. He is wanting more Turkish delight. That's why he's not enjoying his time. And it is rude to refuse a queen, even if she's really not a queen. So, in a sense, Edmund has taken the Turkish delight out of respect, perhaps, right? Like that's a good thought. But we also need to remember that Edmund has been acting cruelly before and after eating the Turkish delight. So, how important do you think the Turkish delight was for Edmund? Is it chaining him to the queen? Yeah, he really wants that Turkish delight. But he's also willing to put his siblings in danger, or at least make them kind of slaves for the queen, in order to get that Turkish delight. Because remember, the queen offered, hey, you can come to my castle and be my prince and get as much Turkish delight as you want, and your siblings will have to serve you. And so that gets Edmund really excited. The Turkish delight is this thing he's holding on to that he wants, but in reality, I think, and I want to hear what you think, in reality, it seems that he has desires that are even deeper and meaner than just Turkish delight. The Turkish delight is just kind of representing these things that Edmund wants that aren't good. Instead of wanting a good relationship with his siblings, he wants a mean relationship with his siblings. And he wants a ton of attention that doesn't even have to be good, just for the sake of having his wants served first. So even though Edmund is doing it, you're right, Bella. You shouldn't refuse things from even people in high places. But if you have a bad character making wrong decisions, that's not going to let you discern or figure out if what you're accepting from people is good or bad, and if that person is good or bad. So ultimately, if something is bad, you don't want to go along with it. And Edmund has been willing to go along with what is bad for a long, long time. So much so that he's not even able to think straight about his siblings. His siblings are, according to C.S. Lewis right now, not being mean to him. But Edmund is imagining that they're giving him the cold shoulder. He is not able to enjoy the food in front of him or the relationships he has, because his mind is elsewhere. His mind is tricked by the Turkish delight and wanting evil things, wanting things that are not good for his siblings, and not good for himself. That's taking away all the enjoyment of where he is. And that's why he leaves. He can't take the joy right now because he's so upset and so tricked and so wanting something else that he's not able to enjoy the warmth, the friendship, and the hope that Aslan and the beavers and his siblings are bringing. And yes, there's someone's typing in, Sparrow is typing in a really good note, that no matter what position a person is in, if something is really, really bad, you don't have to go along with it. And a way that I was taught to do it, and I think is a really good way, and Sparrow's bringing it up too, is if you're younger, if you're a child and you're supposed to obey the adults over you, right? But if someone is asking you to do something that is wrong, you can say, well, my parents wouldn't want me to do that, because in the end, the people that you're really supposed to be listening to are your parents, and they want the best for you. And so if someone is saying, do this and it's a wrong thing, or take this and it's a wrong thing, what is right matters even more than being just going along with what an older person is saying. So you can just say, my parents wouldn't want me to do that. And that is a great way to keep being like Lucy, who was able to tell Mr. Tumnus, you're not going to kidnap me, instead of being like Edmund, who has gotten himself into a huge problem because he's refused, because he has eaten the Queen's Turkish Delight. Okay, but I want to concentrate a little bit on the mind games that are happening to Edmund right now. He is on his way to the White Witch, and he's talking to himself. Let's see what his thoughts are. You mustn't think that even now Edmund was quite so bad that he actually wanted his brothers and sisters to be turned into stone. He did want Turkish Delight and to be a prince, and later a king, and to pay Peter out for calling him a beast. As for what the witch would do with the others, he didn't want her to be particularly nice to them, certainly not to put them on the same level as himself. But he managed to believe, or to pretend he believed, that she wouldn't do anything very bad to them, because, he said to himself, all these people who say nasty things about her are her enemies, and probably half of it isn't true. She was jolly nice to me, anyway, much nicer than they are. I expect she is the rightful queen, really. Anyway, she'll be better than that awful Aslan. At least, that was the excuse he made in his own mind for what he was doing. It wasn't a very good excuse, however, for deep down inside him, he really knew that the witch was bad and cruel. Okay, so Edmund knows what is right. Edmund knows that the White Witch has kidnapped Mr. Tumnus. Edmund knows that all of Narnia is afraid of the White Witch. And as it says, he knows deep down that the White Witch is bad and cruel. But not even what he knows is right is stopping him from trying to get what he wants, even the wrong way. We've seen Peter stop himself from doing the wrong thing, even when it's not his natural desire to get what he wants. He's not willing to do the wrong thing for that. We've seen Lucy especially stop herself from doing the wrong thing in order to do the right thing. And we've seen the beavers do hard things that are right, like Mr. Beaver risking himself to keep his promise to Mr. Tumnus. All of these people have done the right thing at a high cost. Now, Edmund is throwing what is right away, all for the sake of getting what he wants, which is the Queen's favor and that Turkish Delight. He's even willing to lie to himself. So he's lied to everyone around him, and right now he's lying to himself. He knows deep down that the witch is cruel. But he's talking himself into believing that she's right. He's putting in all of these excuses, and he's pretending to believe them, even though he doesn't really. But it doesn't matter, right? Because what is true and what is good doesn't matter to Edmund. What matters is that he gets what he wants. So we can talk to ourselves in a very good way or in a very bad way. And it's really important that when we're making a decision or when we're in a hard spot, that we're talking to ourselves things that are true and good, instead of just trying to make ourselves believe what we want to believe in order to get our own way. Because if we stick to what is right, we get to be more like Lucy and enjoy our siblings, enjoy the food in front of us, and enjoy Narnia, rather than being like Edmund, who's constantly running away and hiding in this story. He's very alone and he's very miserable. So just as Edmund is journeying to the White Witch's house, he's getting closer and closer to that evil White Witch, he's also going through a journey inside. He is deceiving himself. He's isolating himself. That means he's making himself be alone without the friendship that could help him. He is tricked by the Turkish delight, and he's guilty. He knows he's guilty. He's done wrong things that he hasn't really apologized for or been forgiven for. And he's angry. He's angry at Peter. He wants to get back at Peter. And those things are driving him closer and closer to the White Witch. So I have a question. If these things are motivating you to do something, do you think that that thing is probably a good thing to do? Do you think that it is a good decision for Edmund to go to the White Witch? I wonder what you think about that. What do you see are differences between Edmund and the other children, and how do you see that affecting the decisions they're making and the people they're hanging out with and the journeys that they are taking? The one set of the children, they're moving towards Aslan, and the other, Edmund, is moving towards the White Witch, all because of where their characters are. So let's keep that contrast in mind. Okay, and now we come to an even sadder part. Edmund began to be afraid of the house, but it was too late to think of turning back now. He crossed the river on the ice and walked up to the house. So he's come to see the Queen's castle, and he is afraid of it. But he keeps going anyway, and it says it was too late to think of turning back now. And I just want to ask you one question. Is it ever too late to think of turning back when you find yourself in a bad situation, whether because you've been put there by something else or you've walked into it yourself? Is it ever too late to turn back? No, you don't ever have to walk into the bad house. Edmund has been acting out of fear, and he's deceived himself along this whole time. But if he had a friend to help him, if he had chosen to stay with his siblings and with the beavers and had realized that sticking to the right is better, he didn't have to keep going. If you ever realize that you're at a point where it's not good to keep going, you don't have to keep going in that direction. But Edmund did, because that's what selfishness does. He kept going against everything that was good to get what he wants. All right, so we don't have any more time to talk about Edmund, but once he gets to the house, we see him trying to selfishly protect himself by putting what he thinks is a live dwarf at risk, and in order to protect himself from what he thinks is a live lion. So we have a little picture of him being willing again to sacrifice the people around him in order to get what he wants. It turns out to be a dwarf and a lion that the White Witch has turned into stone, so thankfully nobody gets hurt here except for the people who are already hurt by being turned into stone by the White Witch. But we see that he is acting fearfully and selfishly and cruelly. Those all go together with Edmund as once he gets to the house. And then he's self-centered. He, instead of respecting Aslan as the hope of what's going to save Narnia, he sees the stone lion and thinks of Aslan, who of course is a lion too, and starts to draw funny faces on the lion. He has no respect or understanding of who Aslan is at all. So he's so self-deceived that he's willing to put down even the hope that Narnia has. So Edmund is just digging this dark hole for himself, and he's been doing that since the story began, until finally he lands in the witch's house. He finds the wolf. Remember the wolf, Mogrim, the captain of the secret police, who wrote the arrest warrant for Mr. Tumnus in the cave that Peter read? Edmund meets him. It turns out that Mogrim is a wolf, and he's bringing Edmund to meet the queen. And Edmund thinks that meeting the queen this way is a good thing, but even Mogrim says, you know what, you're not as fortunate as you think you are. This queen, she's going to use you. So we've already seen that the queen and the White Witch and Edmund have some similarities. They're self-centered, they're selfish, they're willing to do the wrong thing in order to get their own way, and they are lying in order to get a position that does not belong to them. And for better or for worse, the traitors, Edmund and the White Witch, they have teamed up. Edmund has gone to her, given her the information about where Aslan is at the stone table, and she and the queen takes that information. She's furious on hearing that Aslan is here, and of course we understand why, because Aslan is coming to end her reign. That's what the prophecy says. She's terrified of the prophecy. So then they decide to do exactly what Mrs. Beaver thought they would, get onto the sleigh without bells and chase these people down. So we see Edmund and the White Witch behaving cruelly, acting out of fear, lying, being deceitful, and self-deceived. And they're going to lash out at people. They're going to be angry, and they're intending to hurt people. And we find that Edmund is caught up in a story that's way bigger than he is. He doesn't get his Turkish delight. He gets treated like a slave. And that's the end of today's chapter, of 2 chapters. But I don't want to end at that point. I want to go back to the prophecy. This is our last slide. We have just seen one of the darkest moments in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. And it's very easy to think, oh, this is a hopeless situation. This is such a downer. But it's exactly into that darkness that this prophecy has been speaking. Wrong will be right. Now we understand what that wrong is. We see how cruel and sad the White Witch and Edmund are right now. But when Aslan comes in sight, that wrong will be put to right. At the sound of his roar, sorrows will be no more. Edmund's not a happy camper right now. He is really sad. When he bares his teeth, winter meets its death. All of these cold things the White Witch is doing, like turning people into stone, keeping Narnia in winter, that's going to end at the power of Aslan. And when he shakes his mane, we shall have spring again. So there's going to be a spring coming. If everything that Aslan says is true, if these prophecies are true, Aslan is going to bring new life to Narnia. So that's what we want to be holding on to as we move through the rest of the story. Yeah, it's bad. Where Narnia is bad. Where Edmund is bad. But we have this hope from Aslan in this prophecy. And that is what is going to drive the rest of the story. So, not surprisingly, next session, stay tuned because something beautiful happens next time. The prophecies have more to them than just words. So let's see what happens. Again, we want to know more about you. If you're running a camp or if you're a student, we'd love to hear about who you are, why you like Narnia, why you're doing this. If you're running the camp, we'd love to hear how many people are attending. And you can email all of that to academy@signumu.org. If you have any questions, too, that you want to be addressed in the following sessions, just email me there, and I'd be happy to talk about your questions in class. And then if you want to know more about Signum in general, just check out our website at signumuniversity.org. There's a lot of information on there about everything we do. So I look forward to hearing from you and hopefully seeing you next session. You all take care and have a great day. Bye.